Hi everyone, this is a video edition of the Scattered podcast. I'm Yvonne Chorlin. I'm a physical or biological anthropologist and archaeologist, and this is a short video of my contribution to the Alberta portion of a cross-Canada scavenging project led by Dr. Sherry Forbes. To learn more about Sherry and the origin of this project, listen to episode 16 of the audio portion of this podcast. In a nutshell, law enforcement need to recover as much potential forensic evidence as possible to help solve cases. They approach Sherry with two questions. Where do we search for this evidence and how far do we search for it? To help answer these questions, Sherry wants to identify the scavengers and their scavenger behavior to figure out who may have influenced the movement of this evidence, and then also to map the dispersal of the evidence so we know where it went. By identifying the scavengers and their scavenger behavior and mapping the dispersal of the evidence, we hope to see patterns and be able to answer the two questions of where and how far to search for the remains so that we can answer this for law enforcement. So having these ideas and these questions is all fine and dandy, but how do you do this? How do you identify the scavengers and map the dispersal of the remains? Well, that's where this video comes in. I'm going to show you. All right, it is August 24th, 2022. This is Elk Island closed. We have a forested site with black spruce, tamarack. So we've got a moss and floor with some Labrador tea, which is, you can't see it because we've cut most of it away. There it is. And yeah, so we've got a dressed pig. We've got a camera here. We've got a camera over there. And we have a camera right here. I'm standing at the egress point, which is a bit bloody, and we've got right there a range road. So if somebody was going to potentially drag a body, a bad person dragging a victim off the road and into the woods, this would make it a nice approximation of that type scenario. So we've got a cable going to a tree there. That is south, that way's north, that's west, that's east. We have two trackers on this pig. Like before, we have one on the forelimb, one on the hind limb. And instead of staking the original position, what I've done is I've taken a nail with some flagging and marked the head and the tail. So if the pig is rotated or moved, and we don't have any body staining to mark the original deposition point, then hopefully those two flags will mark the head and the tail. And that should hopefully help us. So again, we've got a camera there in the south. We've got a camera there to the north. We've got a camera to the west, and then the cable to a tree. And then we've got egress there up to the road. And there's a few residences in this area. We have about 800 meters that way. We've got a residence. We've got one to the southwest, about 70 meters. Another residence about 200 meters that way. So we could potentially have people curious about the smell, possible domestic dogs. But we'll see what shows up on the cameras. And we'll do another video at that time. While the pig was being set up and Sherry was setting up the cameras, I took notes and photographs of the pig and the surrounding area, and I made a sketch map of any topographical features, including fence lines, buildings, and roads. Then we set the cameras and we left and waited for the scavengers to show up. We had coyotes show up within the first few days after we deposited the carcass. They returned regularly and frequently and fed mostly at night. So it is November 1st, 2022. This is the Elk Island forested site. We have performed our search. The original deposition point is right here. Unfortunately, the little pink flags that I put in there to mark the head and tail, which are like that. The pig was positioned this way with the feet that way. North is that way, south is that way, east, west. There is a secondary road running right here, north-south. So original deposition point with the two pink flags have now disappeared. The nails were pulled out and the pink flagging is here and over here. We have a scatter mostly towards the north. Game trails are the game trails are very distinct in here. They are well used and probably have been used recently. So you can see there's a bone there, there's a bone there right on the game trail. You can actually see the game trail running right along. You can see the game trails are very clear. We've got a scatter pattern going towards the north predominantly, so mostly this way. We've got a little bit going that way, some going that way, some over here, and then a little bit towards the east you can see in here. We've got these bones have been weathered. You can see them, they're very easy to see. So between the moss floor with very little leaf litter, the bleaching of the bones to make them stand out, and then the very distinct game trails, it was very easy to search in here. There's the shirt. So this pig was dressed in a yellow plaid shirt, which is that, and blue shorts, which we found about 60 meters just over there. Sherry and Dennis followed the tracker signal that we're using with an antenna. So we put a tracker on one of the limbs of the pig, and so the pig site is back over there. Oh, I'm guessing maybe 250 meters that way. There's a trail this way. We've got a residence. We've got an antenna you can see Sherry holding there that is supposed to track the tracker that we attached to one of the limbs. They followed the signal into this low wet area in here. It's currently not wet because it's November. Thankfully it's not wet. But there's all this Labrador tea. We've got black spruce and willows, and Dennis found this den, possibly coyote den. We don't know if it's active, maybe not, but there's no bones. Can't see it anywhere. You can see it's surrounded by a low area in there with the grassiness. This is what a coyote den can look like. But again, no bones. The tracker led us to this area. We could not find the tracker, but the antenna said it's in here somewhere. Finding the tracker and whether or not it's still attached to the hind limb, we don't know. So, to be continued. And so we will come back next summer to do a collection, to do another search and a collection, and we'll see what's left at that time. All right, today is August 18th, 2023. We are at the Elk Island closed site. This is our original deposition point. East, west, north, south. We've got a range road right here and a township road behind me. This is all on private land. We've got private residences to the east. So the majority of the dispersal went to the north, a little bit to the northeast, and northwest in there. And we're still finding a lot of remains. And anything that is still here has been scavenged. We're finding a lot of fragments, and if the bones are identifiable, then they have a lot of tooth marks. You can actually see where the animal has gnawed on the bone. When I did an inventory on the remains we recovered about 1 year after we deposited the pig, I found that we had recovered about 20% of the skeleton. This was less than we had hoped, but it was within range and compared well with the other sites that we had. When I looked at what types of bones made up the remains we recovered closest to the original deposition point, I saw it was mostly vertebrae and ribs. When I looked at what remains we had observed at the preliminary search and what remains we had collected at the final visit, at this site I saw that they were pretty much the same. So what do we know so far? At this site, our main scavenger was coyote, and mostly at night. Activity at this site started within the first week and continued for several weeks. Coyotes and other scavengers used pre-existing trails in the dispersal of the remains, and the remains were dispersed from the original deposition point in a north and northeast and east direction. We recovered about 20% of the skeleton, and the majority of the bones we recovered were vertebrae and ribs. We also learned that remains can travel a long way, thanks to one of the trackers we used. We now have evidence one of the limbs was dispersed 150 meters northeast of the original deposition point. What have we learned overall across all our sites? We learned that our main scavengers are coyotes, bears, and birds. Game trails can be created or used by scavengers to access the carcass and to disperse the remains. We learned that sometimes there is a difference in the number of remains observed at the preliminary search and the number of remains collected at the final search. We also learned that we mostly collected vertebrae and ribs. This video wouldn't have been possible without the study led by Dr. Shari Forbes. The Calgary and Edmonton Police Service were instrumental in helping us to find land to use, coordinate the searches and carcasses, and of course, to let us know if this information is useful to them. Many big thanks to the landowners and pig growers. We couldn't have done this research without you. And for this site, many thanks to the University of Alberta anthropology students who helped us. To find out more about this study, tune into my podcast, Scattered, One Person's Search for the Story Behind Human Remains, available on your favorite podcast platform. Also, check out the other videos in this series available on my website, yvonnechorlin.com, and read about it on my blog and on Facebook.